What's up guys, it's me Coach Mills, and today we're going to be breaking down one tip for every single rank from bronze to top 500. We're going to be breaking down exactly what you need in order to improve and dominate. But if you want private coaching or to support the channel, go check out my Patreon links right now in the description down below, and let's get started. Now the first rank is the Wild West of Overwatch, the bronze rank, and there's some different types of people in this rank. There are people that are typically very new to Overwatch, definitely, but games in general also. Sometimes bronze players will be very new to an FPS, they just made the swap to console or PC, or they haven't really just played games all that much. Now their settings also could not be in order. They could have extremely high sensitivities. I've seen people that have a DPI of like 10 freaking thousand. Or they're rocking with equipment that's super outdated, like a mouse they stole from their high school library. Now, after those things, the thing that you're probably not doing enough to get out of bronze is you're simply not playing enough comp, and specifically comp role queue. I've met players that have only played quick play or they're scared of comp. Realize that you need to play if you want to get better. Now, if all of these things are not you, like your settings are in order and your equipment is decent and you're playing enough ranks and you're not actually ranking up, the two things I would suggest for you is to focus on your mechanical skill. Make sure that you are doing your due diligence with actually improving your mechanics. If you're a true beginner, something like aim trainers could help you. If you're not a true beginner, use code VAXTA in your own custom warm-up routine for like 10 minutes. It's going to help your mechanics. And also just focus on trying to play and learn. I would say try everything, learn the game, play a little bit of every single character, and at some point things will bubble up and you will break through to the next rank, the silver rank. And honestly, the silver rank isn't that much different from bronze, but it's players that have broken through that initial phase when after you've played enough and your things are properly in order and you've actually improved, you get to the silver rank. And I've met a lot of players that have stayed in the silver rank for a very long time. This is a rank that it's very easy to get hard stuck in because a giant amount of the player base stays in silver. It's one of the biggest ranks in the entire game. And if your settings and equipment are in order, I'm just going to assume they are at this point, these are the limiting things that can actually hinder your impact. The first one that I want you to nail down 100% is ultimate usage. Ults are to win team fights. If you're using an ult, you need to be getting value out of it, whether that's kills, whether that's denying enemy ultimates, whether that's leading to your team winning the overall fight. However it happens, an ult needs to get very specific value, and I want you to really analyze all your ults that you're using that are not getting value. If you use an ult in a fight that you don't win, you need to ask yourself, was that a good ult use? Did I use that too early? Did I use that too late? Did I actually not even need to ult? Or should I have saved my ult for the next fight? Getting value out of every single one of your ultimates is enough to climb out of silver rank, and players don't do this. So this is something I want you to hyper focus on. The next thing I want you to do in the silver rank is learn. Learn, become a student of the game and absorb everything you possibly can. Watch the game, play the game a lot, and of course watch guides like this one on this channel. So you got to smash that subscribe. And then also I want you to keep working on your mechanical skill. Right now, mechanics are not going to be the thing that's holding you back, but having good mechanics can make the rank up process easier, and I want your mechanical development to be consistent with your rank ups. Otherwise, you're going to hit a higher rank at some point, and your mechanics are going to be really lacking, and then you're going to have to put even extra effort into grinding your mechanics. At least that's what happened to me once I got to the diamond rank way back when. I was there because I understood a lot about the game because I was a big time student of the game, but my mechanics absolutely sucked. So I had to spend a ton of time trying to improve my mechanics. And yeah, I don't want you to end up in that situation. So still focus on those mechanics, doing those warm-up drills. You don't need aim trainers anymore at this point, but VAXTA or Tryhard Free-For-All are things that I would suggest to do for, you know, anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes before you play your ranked games, and make sure you're playing as much ranked as possible. Next, we have the gold rank. And in gold, things are starting to ramp up a little bit. Players loosely understand their role, or at the very least understand what they're trying to accomplish. It's not as chaotic as things were back in bronze, where players would basically just try out characters on a whim and not really understand what they're supposed to be accomplishing. But That still doesn't mean that players are playing their role correctly. They just loosely understand what they're supposed to do. But also, there are misconceptions often about your own role and other roles. So you'll see a support main having misconceptions about what they're supposed to be doing. Like they think they're only supposed to heal bot, or they're Moras that only DPS, or they have huge misconceptions about the roles they don't play. You know, they're like, oh, there's a Pharah. I need my Cassidy to two-tap that thing out of the air. Or, oh, what are you doing, Ryan? Shield up. Stop running in. Stop swinging your hammer. Blah, 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 blah. There's a ton of misconceptions about everyone else. And yeah, this is a big problem in the gold rank, which it's easy to run into these problems because there's a lot of players that don't ever try to learn. They don't watch guides. They just play the game. And the game doesn't really teach you properly because you're doing things wrong and getting rewarded for them sometimes and getting punished for them other times because you're up against like random enemies, right? So not every player is going to do what they're supposed to do, and you learn wrong because of it. On top of that, mechanics and game sense, these things are going to be, you know, pretty mid overall. Gold mechanics could be okay, but the game sense is going to be pretty low. But the big things that are limiting you on impact, first off, is your ability usage. You're not using your abilities. The same way that we talked about ultimate usage, gold players definitely still don't have ultimate usage that well, and you still need to work on that. But sloppy ability usage can be incredibly important as well, because if you're just using abilities for basically no reason, whether that's Suzu or Nade or Amp Up, and on the DPS side, whether that's Roll or Grenade or Reaper Wraith, I want you to start thinking about how you're using each ability. Did you need to use it in the situations that you did, or were there opportunities for you to use it and you didn't use it? So this is really where you want to min-max your ability use and make sure that you're not wasting any abilities or dying before you use your abilities. This is really important. Another thing that you need to really stop doing completely now that you're in gold is staggering. You want to have full regroups if at all possible. Now, in bronze and silver, it's the same thing, but the reality of those ranks is it kind of morphs down more into a death match rather than a team fight oftentimes. You still want to prevent the stagger, but you cannot control the other members of your team that are just staggering over and over. But in gold, you never want to be the person that is staggering. Even if your teammates are doing it, make sure that you are not the one doing it. And then also in gold, you want to start to understand the matchups on how to succeed. You really learn what matchups you're good against and bad against and why, and think about ways in which you can still succeed against the matchups that you struggle against. And then we move on to the next rank, the platinum rank, probably the most toxic rank in the entire game. And the big reason that is because the expectations have risen when you're finally in platinum. People expect things from their teammates, but there is often a failure to meet those expectations that causes that toxicity. So you'll have players that really expect things from the DPS. DPS, do damage. DPS, get a pick. Or they'll have a DPS player that's like, supports, why aren't you healing me? Why aren't you healing me? What are you doing? Why are you trying to do this and that and this and that? Why aren't you just healing me and pocketing me? Or you'll have a tank that's like, no one's doing anything. I can't do anything. I'm just existing and no one else is helping me. Whatever the case may be, everyone has expectations for everyone around them, and that creates toxicity, even though there's things that they could be doing more that they don't even see, right? On top of that, mechanics, game sense, all that stuff is still mid. Sometimes you'll have players that have higher mechanics and lower game sense, or higher game sense and lower mechanics, but it kind of becomes a wash. But the big things that are limiting your impact, first off, is inconsistency. This is a big one that players kind of know what they're supposed to be doing, but there'll be some games that they do well, and there's some games that they do terrible, and it could be due to enemy picks that they're not identifying is hard for them to deal with, or they're playing against wrong, or it could be due to their own gameplay. They're not consistent enough in their own game plan, game after game. Like, a great example of this is like a Genji that every time they see like an Ana or a Zen, they just dash at them, right? Sometimes it's going to work, sometimes it's not going to work, but it's really dependent on the enemy messing up or, you know, things going right for you in the moment. And that's not a consistent way to play. That's just like a YOLO way to play that might work against bad enemies, but probably won't work a very high percentage of the time. You're dying a lot of unnecessary deaths in Platinum. You're dying way more than you should, whether that's staggering or getting over aggressive, thinking that your team's gonna back you up, assuming that your teammates are gonna do what you think they're gonna do, like you're poking in front when your teammates are trying to regroup and you die and you blame your supports, whatever the case may be. And then the most difficult thing about Platinum is you need to start communicating with your teammates. This is a hard one, but with pinging, it's easier now than ever, and communication is important. Telling your teammates to group up, saying, hey, let's ultimate combo. These are things that is really, really, really important to nail down. And I would say this is the hardest thing for a Platinum player to do, but I cannot tell you how much you can carry games with comms. Learning simple comms and just easy things like, hey, can we do this? Next fight, they got no defensible. Let's do a nano blade. Whatever the case may be, communicate with your teammates. It's super, super simple, and it's going to get you a ton of value. And this is the rank when I start to suggest people to start to specialize. I would say before this, you should have just like played everything. You should have tried to get every single role up to a certain level and kind of grinded everything. But once you get everything to the platinum rank and you're kind of floating around this rank, I want you to spend all your time focusing on one role. And I also want you to spend your time focusing on a select number of heroes in that role. This is going to maximize your improvement rate, and you can always go back and revisit some of the other roles later as you improve. But you're going to compound your time, and you're going to see exponential growth if you really, really focus on a select number of characters and you see the game through the lens of those characters game after game after game. It's going to help you improve at a much greater rate. So once you get to the platinum rank, this is when I truly suggest to specialize. Next off, we have the diamond rank, and this is the rank of people with various skills. This is probably the most polarizing rank because there's players that get to this rank with all sorts of different talents. Sometimes players will get to the diamond rank just because they were really, really good, like an FPS god, at another game. Like if they were really great at Apex or even really great at like Counter-Strike, they come to Overwatch, get used to the game for a little bit, and then they're in Diamond. Or maybe they're a MOBA god, like they were Challenger in League of Legends, and now they come to Overwatch and boom, they're in Diamond because they have the freaking understanding to play tank and use their cooldowns properly, and boom, they're here. Or there's people that have been grinding the game for a long time and they're in Diamond. So what I'm saying is the skills of everyone that you're going to meet is very, very different. And how they got here is very, very different. So sometimes you'll have people that have decent mechanics and great game sense or good game sense, or pretty good mechanics and bad game sense. Like they can frag out, but they have no idea what like half the characters do on the roster. And the big things that are limiting you on impact when you're in the diamond rank is you have, one, really high peaks and really low lows. It's like that inconsistency problem of plat, but the peaks are higher and the lows are even higher. So you'll have some games where you're like just popping off. If you're a DPS, you're going like 35 and 2. If you're a support, you're popping off and just like never ever dying and just getting crazy sleeps or whatever. If you're a tank, you're just completely fragging out. And then you have another game where you are basically so far down the leaderboard and you're doing so little that it's like you're a goddamn bronze player again. And this happens over and over again. And it's because you're not identifying some key mistakes that you're making over and over again. And sometimes you're getting punished for them and sometimes you're not. Another thing that diamond players are not doing is they're not identifying the win condition. And while this is a really complex idea, and I need to make an entirely separate video on it, the big takeaway is that you need to understand what will win you the team fight, the 5v5. And that could be a number of different things. Whether it's the opponents have ultimates that they're going to try to win the team fight with. And if you can't disrupt that, then you're going to lose. And if you can disrupt it, you're going to win. That's one example. Or maybe they have no defensive ultimate and y'all have a combo. So if you're not part of the two characters in the combo, it's your job to help enable that combo. If you're like trying to set up a Grav Dragon, for instance, and you're a Lucio, it's your job to keep your Hanzo alive so that he can drag it. If he gets dove and you don't peel for him and he dies and you have no one to follow up on the grab, you lose. That's one example of the win condition that you need to identify. So you could be doing a million things and they could be wrong because what you should do is be enabling the win condition. So that's just one example, but there's a lot of them. On top of that, in the diamond rank, you need to occasionally go above and beyond. Seeing key moments where you can actually turn a fight that you might have a fundamental disadvantage in, but you see the lines to push through anyways, and it's a good idea to limit test these somewhat, trying to make it so that you're not feeding and throwing fights, but at the same time, don't always go for the safest plays, because I think trying to go for these and pulling them off is going to be one of the ways you push yourself to the next level. And also in the diamond rank, something that is holding you back is that you don't help your team enough. Oftentimes you're trying to just make everything about you. And I understand that, because to get to the diamond rank, you had to be very selfish and think only about your own impact. But here, you're in the diamond rank, you have some players that you can rely on. If you enable them, if you think about what they need and what they're trying to do, oftentimes together, y'all could pull off a lot more than you would separate. So help your team and think about what they're trying to do. I would also say you want to start working on your mechanics again. Mid-level mechanics really won't cut it anymore as you start going up against masters and people above that. So try it free-for-all, Vaxta. Keep your warm-up going. Keep practicing your mechanical skill. Put an emphasis on that. I would even suggest go as far as going into a custom game and practicing skill-based ultimates like Pulse Bombs, Primal Rages, and the works. Next up, we have the Masters rank, and this is finally the rank where you're playing base level Overwatch. So I'm kind of only half joking, but most players in the Masters rank kind of know how to play the game semi-properly, as in they're always thinking about how to combo ultimates, what ultimates the enemy have, and how to win team fights and counters and swapping, and you'll see a lot of that in the Masters rank. Not perfectly well, and players are often still messing up a lot of things and making huge amount of mistakes, but they know what they should be doing at the very least. Now you have players with decent skills kind of across the board, but in one category, sometimes they'll show above average or even good skills. So like good mechanics, or you'll run into people that really know how to properly play around something, or they're positioning really well, and the rest of their skills are kind of decent. Now, the limiting things for players in Masters. One is a lack of understanding of meta or anti-meta. People play a lot more of the meta when you start to climb in Masters, so you need to understand what the meta is, why it's strong, how to play against it if you're playing anti-meta, and just learning how to play against a lot of the most picked characters in the game, because you're more likely to run into them now. On top of that, you need to have a proper evaluation of risk versus reward. Like, if you're gonna go for something, what is the risk involved in going for a play, and what's the reward if you pull it off? Evaluating when and where the risk to reward like dichotomy makes sense, and when it doesn't, and it just makes sense to back up, generate ult charge, and regroup with your team. That's the hard question that a lot of Master players don't know how to answer perfectly every time. On top of that, Masters players can easily let stats and knowledge hold them back, where they think very, very specific things about the game, even if they're slightly wrong or in certain contexts they don't work, but they don't change their opinions anymore. And that's when a Masters player can really get rooted in Masters and sometimes even revert in skill and not improve, because the game is way more complex, and sometimes things that were true before aren't true anymore, and sometimes things that are true are not, you know, black and white true, they're shades of gray, and you need to be okay with changing your mind about some things, or shifting your beliefs here or there, or being more adaptable and flexible. Another thing that Masters players do is they make too many mistakes. So, you know, they're still making a lot of mistakes, not nearly as much as the previous ranks, but Masters players oftentimes are going for more aggressive plays, and they're not doing them correctly, or they're going too aggressive, and they're still making a ton of mistakes, even if their peaks are a bit higher. And then, of course, the selfishness and the ego is rampant in a rank like Masters. Everyone thinks they're right, everyone thinks they're a god, and regardless of how well you're playing, you can always do more, you can always improve, you can always make less mistakes. So leave the selfishness and the ego at the door. Now, what I would suggest for a Masters player to truly improve is basically keep developing in everything, but also add in VOD reviews, whether that's self-VODs, or you're trying to get someone else to VOD review you on top, whether that's someone that is even in your rank, a buddy, or you can hit me up on the Patreon so I could VOD review, or anyone that you want to that will just look at your gameplay and note some of the things that you did right or wrong. Oftentimes, a pair of eyes that are looking at your same gameplay will see mistakes that you just didn't manage to see because it's too close to home. And Masters is also the rank that I highly suggest starting to scrim. Overwatch is ultimately a team game, and you need to learn the communication and coordination that a scrim environment provides. A coordinated 5v5 that you play against other coordinated teams, where you have established roles and consistent communication. This is one of the best ways to further your skill set and evolve beyond the Masters rank if you start scrimming consistently. Now, next up, we got to talk about Grandmaster. And when you're in Grandmaster, generally people are good. Now, if you're a top 500 player and you're like, GM, people suck, who cares about your opinion? No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. But yeah, for the vast majority of the people that play this game, Grandmaster players are good. Now, you can expect people to do the most things right. Not everything right, but the most things. Like, they'll do the right thing generally. Like, they're not going to stagger crazy. They're not going to make these silly little mistakes. They're going to make mistakes, of course, but they're not going to just make these silly little ones that the vast majority of players make, because if they were still making those silly little mistakes, then they would not be here, because they would get punished for them by the GM players that they needed to kind of replace to take their spot. On top of that, players will have high skills in multiple categories, but occasionally a Grandmaster will show extremely high skill in one area, whether that's very, very good mechanics, like God tier, or their positioning is incredible, where they're very, very hard to punish, or their understanding of the game is really high and they have ult tracking on point and they can do this and that and juggle all these different things. Think about the overall use of everyone on their team, the ability use and things like that. That is what can happen, but typically everyone has high skills on average and everything, and then one thing will be spiked up. And now the limiting thing on your impact, the first thing is the respect earned versus the respect granted. This is when you're trying to min-max your value. Oftentimes you have to give a certain amount of respect to someone, but you should not give them more respect than they deserve. So what often can happen is players are playing too safe up against opponents that do not deserve a certain level of respect. So it's almost like they're playing frightened up against the player that they should not be giving respect to in the first place. And on the flip side, they're giving no respect to someone that they really should respect. So the balance here is giving an opponent just the right amount of respect to play just outside of that area that they can punish you in. And that's something that you have to learn how to do compared to the people in your rank and adapt it throughout a game so that you're never crossing that barrier so that an enemy can punish you. If you could play just outside the line where if you cross it, you get punished, and if you don't cross it, the enemy can't punish you, then you are playing for the most amount of impact with the least amount of punishment. And it's a very hard line to play on, but it's really important if you want to improve even further. Now, of course, carry consistency is something that could be limiting you if you're not very consistent in your overall high performance and you're carrying of the game. Because if you want to push past this, you have to carry a lot of games and you have to do it consistently. So what is your carry consistency like? Are you actually performing at a high level? And are you able to pull off these carry plays with a decent amount of reliability throughout the course of each game you play? On top of that, you're going to need a high base performance. So even in the Grandmaster level, people have problems with consistency where their, base performance is okay, but your base performance needs to be as high as possible. So even when you're at your worst, you're still doing very, very, very well. And when you're at your best, your peak, you're doing insane things. That is actually just carrying fights and putting out a ton of value. And of course, you need to be lowering your mistakes down. Realistically, if you want to make the break into top 500, top 100, top 10, you need to lower your mistakes as little as possible. And on top of that, you need to find your weakness. Every single person has weaknesses that they're making. You need to find them. I would highly suggest VOD reviews if you haven't already got them from anyone, even people in your rank, buddies, coaches, whatever. Just analyze your gameplay and find what you're doing wrong and slowly but surely eradicate every mistake you're making, and then be creative in the solutions you're coming up with. If you root your ideas in the fundamentals that you have learned up to this point, you can think outside the box and still make the right play that other people might not have been able to see. Now, last up, we got to talk about top 500, the God tier, and I'm also going to include like top 100 and whatever the case may be, the high ranks in the game. Now, you can expect them to be good at basically everything in some way. They're going to be amazing at most things, but they could be even incredible at something. Their brain, their mechanics, their positioning, they could be like actually incredible at one of these or even two of these. And that means that they are playing as close to perfection as players typically play in ranked, where they're making very little mistakes, hitting shots that are very, very hard to hit reliably, and they're just playing exactly how they should to give themselves the best chance of winning. And their mistakes are just really low, like low to the ground. I would say that like in gold, players are making like 50 to 100 mistakes a game. When you get to the top 500, top 100, top 10, these players will win or lose a game based on a couple of mistakes, maybe even one big mistake. So they can't make these mistakes. They have to basically just make as many decisions right as possible. And it's basically everything at GM, but to a higher bar. Now, the top 500 player wants to get to top 100 or top 10 or be rank 1. So how do they do this? What are the big things that they need to do if they want to push that envelope and push themselves to the next level? They need to show incredible skills in certain areas. Now, this means incredible skills on certain characters and certain metas, credible in skills on certain mechanics, credible skills and decision-making, just overall, to the point where they are better already than a lot of the people that they're playing with and against, even the players that are already playing at this high of level. And on top of that, they need to play like they will die if they lose. And I don't really mean that literally, but these players are so just focused and driven to be the best that they play and play and play and play. But I mean, come on, what advice could I possibly give you if you're already this high up? So yeah, you got this, man. I'll just be your motivational support, because getting your mind right is like, you know, half the battle. Anyways, these are the tips that I got for you for every single rank. Definitely let me know if you are running into the same problems that I listed for your rank. But if you need specialized help, definitely go check out my Patreon for some VOD reviews in the description down below. Subscribe to my Twitch, because I'm going to be doing my first stream very soon, and I'll see you next time.